Hi, yesterday I saw Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. How was this movie? Well, it was definitely better than the last one, The Force Awakens, which I didn't like at all. It was just a bad copy of the very first Star Wars movie, A New Hope. And this, The Last Jedi, is something different, something new. They try new things, which I thought was good. I liked the main characters, Luke and Rey, and also Kylo Ren actually in this movie. I didn't like him in the last one, but I liked him in this one. He was okay at least. That's about it with the positives. There was some more information about the Force, and they managed to restore the mysticism concerning the Force. In the prequel, which I hate, they tried to explain the Force by science, these midichlorians or something like that, and I am grateful that they didn't continue on this path. They went back, as in so many other aspects as well, to the original Star Wars movies and made the Force more into a part of a religion. There are even religious texts in the movie, which is an interesting thing. Although they don't really read these texts, but still they are religious texts. So the Force is part of a religion, and there are also some new aspects with the Force, which of course I will not give away, which I found interesting and were certainly justified for the movie, although some Star Wars purists may be a little bit upset about this, possibly. Then to the negatives. Well, the main problem, I think, with the film is that there is a fairly long sequence. It's about 20 minutes, which doesn't feel and look like in a Star Wars movie, in the Star Wars universe. It's a kind of casino environment. It's somewhat absurdistic, and it's fairly childish too, I thought, and it doesn't fit into the movie and this world at all. That was a big problem. Another problem with the movie is, strangely enough, that the casting, I thought, was very, very bad. Except for the main characters, basically all the characters, all the actors in the movie are extremely boring. They look, in their roles at least, they look worn out, they lack energy, they lack charisma. There are political leaders and generals and so on, which would never be in such a position in real life, because they simply don't have the skills, obviously, for leading people. They don't have the drive, they don't have the authority and so on to lead others. They seem like people who should be working in their own garden or collecting stamps or something similar, not like political leaders or generals or other important people. And that was fairly disappointing, I must say, in a Star Wars movie. The last two negatives that I have is, first, that the movie is still far too similar to earlier Star Wars movies, especially The Empire Strikes Back and The Return of the Jedi. It's not as terrible as in the last movie, which was simply, really, as I said, a bad copy of the very first Star Wars movie. This is more independent, but there are many similarities, and I would say too many, so that you are reminded of Empire and Return of the Jedi again and again, and these movies are simply much better films than this one is. They are much more of a coherent whole, they have much more interesting characters, and they have real humor, which doesn't feel forced, not the Force, but forced, which it still does in this movie. In the last one, The Force Awakens, it was even worse, but it still feels forced. The humor feels forced also in this movie, and of course it doesn't in the original trilogy. My last point in this criticism is the political correctness of the movie, which is fairly irritating actually. It's obvious that they try to adjust to an Asian market, there's an Asian lead in the movie. They also want to, obviously, to avoid criticism of being an all-white cast, so they, like in the last movie of course, they have a leading Afro-American character. I wouldn't have a problem with this if these were interesting characters and if their background would bring something to the movie, but it doesn't. They are just there to be politically correct. It is very obvious, and in addition, this Asian woman falls for this Afro-American guy in the movie, which seems very unbelievable. Now I'm talking about people, of course, from Earth, but it's not possible to avoid such associations if you watch Asian or Afro-American actors in a science fiction movie. I know this takes place in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, and so on, but you still have these associations, and they are unavoidable. And there is a big problem with racism against Afro-Americans. I know within the Arab world, a lot of Arabs are racist towards, even towards Afro-Americans who are Muslims, other Muslims, just because they're Afro-American. And I also know that a lot of Asians are racists towards Afro-Americans. So this is not really a love story, but this affection that this Asian woman has and develops for this Afro-American guy doesn't seem realistic, and it doesn't seem sincere, come over as sincere in the story. And a lot of the leaders in the movie are women, and I would say too many to be realistic. I find dominant and powerful women in a story interesting and intriguing. I have nothing at all against that, not at all. But if you have so many female leaders in such a story, it seems politically correct. It seems like a political choice more than a choice for the story itself, to make the story interesting. And what's more, most of the men in the leading male characters in the movie seem fairly weak and powerless, and also fairly stupid. So this certainly is also a political choice, I believe, if not even a feminist choice, which I think destroys the story, because it's not realistic anymore, and you can see again and again that political choices have been made, and it takes you out of the story, and you're not invested in it anymore. This is a fairly long movie. It's the longest of all the Star Wars movies up to date. It's 152 minutes, and it also felt long. I was somewhat invested in the scenes involving Rey and Luke, and in the scenes involving Rey and Kylo Ren. They managed to do some good dialogue, actually, and introduced a few new aspects to the Force, as I said, which made these scenes interesting. I was invested in these scenes, but I wasn't invested in the rest. Of course, there are great space battles and battles on a planet as well, but they are too reminiscent of earlier Star Wars movies, especially as I said, Empire and Return of the Jedi, to be really interesting. We have seen it before, and I think they should have gone the full way and done something really new, and it could have made a really good Star Wars movie if they had been able to leave the original Star Wars movies behind and try something really new. But I don't think they had the courage to do that. They had some more courage than in the last movie, which was just a bad copy, but still there are too many things which bind it still to the first trilogy. So it's not an original movie in and of itself. It's more of continuing in the same vein, trying to recapture the original aura and magic of the first Star Wars movies, and it's simply not possible to do that. It's nostalgia has no interest in its own. You have to look forward, and do something new, do something different to make a good work of art. And this movie, I must say, is not a good work of art or a real work of art. So that's my take on this new Star Wars movie. If you're a Star Wars fan, I recommend you to see it, because there are a few interesting things in there, and it's a chance, of course, to see Luke and Leia and the others from the very first movie again. This is exactly 40 years after the first Star Wars movie was released. It's a long time ago, and for us oldies, it is kind of nostalgic watching the same characters and played by the same actors on the big screen again after so many years. So I enjoyed parts of this movie. I don't regret having seen it, and I will probably see the last part in this trilogy as well, which will come out in 2 years. Thank you for your attention. Please give me your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon again.